Have you ever really stopped to think about the plants we eat? I mean, what if they haven't just been feeding us, but have been actively shaping us? From our DNA all the way to the rise and fall of entire empires. It's a pretty wild idea, so let's get right into it.
You know, we tend to think of ourselves as the masters of the natural world, right? We're the ones domesticating plants, bending them to our will. But what if that's just the wrong way to look at it? What if we're actually locked in this deep, codependent relationship where a lot of the time they're the ones calling the shots?
And there's actually a whole field of science dedicated to this very idea. It's called ethnobotany. And it's not just about, making a list of what plants people use. No, it's about understanding this really intricate two-way street, this partnership that has pretty much defined all of human history. To see just how deep this partnership really goes, we don't have to look any further than ourselves, our own bodies. Our biology is like this living, breathing archive, and it's recorded every major milestone in our long relationship with the plant world. Think about this. Why can we see in color? Specifically, why are we primates so good at telling red from green? That is no accident. It's a sensory adaptation that was fine-tuned for one absolutely critical task: spotting bright, ripe, high-calorie fruit against a sea of green leaves from far away. That's coevolution, right there in your own eyes. But our senses, that was just the start. The real game changer was fire. See, cooking is basically a form of external digestion. It does the hard work for us, breaking down tough plant fibers and unlocking this treasure trove of calories that were totally off limits to us before.
And what this did to our ancestors, well, it sparked this huge evolutionary trade-off. Over on the left, you see Australopithecus, big gut, small brain. That giant digestive tract was necessary to process all those raw, tough plants. But on the right, you've got Homo erectus, smaller gut and a much, much bigger brain. That incredible shift was only possible because a cooked, energy-rich diet was doing a lot of the digestive work for them.
And this change in diet left a crystal-clear fingerprint on our DNA. As we started eating more and more starchy plants like potatoes and tubers, there was intense evolutionary pressure on one specific gene. It's called AMY1. And its job? To create the enzyme in our saliva that starts breaking down starches the very second they hit your tongue.
And the evidence for this is it's undeniable. You can see here that populations with a long history of farming high-starch foods have way more copies of that AMY1 gene. Compare that to populations from low-starch environments like hunter-gatherer societies. It's not a metaphor. Plants literally rewrote our genetic code so we could digest them better.
Okay, but here's the thing. Just changing our genes wasn't always enough. For certain plants, we also had to develop a kind of cultural user manual to unlock their power safely. And there is no better example of this than the story of corn. Now, maize, what we call corn, was this miracle crop, a true feat of bioengineering by indigenous peoples in the Americas. It is a caloric powerhouse, but it has a dangerous secret. One of its most vital nutrients, vitamin B3, is chemically locked away. In its raw form, our bodies just can't access it. So ancient Mesoamerican cultures, they figured this out. They developed a brilliant chemical process to crack the code. It's called nixtamalization. It involves cooking and steeping the corn in an alkaline solution, like water mixed with wood ash. This simple-sounding process triggers some really crucial biochemical changes. And the results? They are incredible. Not only does it set that niacin free, but it also pumps up the calcium content, makes the corn easier to digest, and even gets rid of dangerous fungal toxins. This technique turned corn from a risky crop into the absolute foundation of empires like the Maya and the Aztec.
But this is where the story takes a really tragic turn. When European colonizers brought maize back to their home countries, they took the plant, but they left its instruction manual behind. They saw it as just another commodity and were totally clueless about the nixtamalization process. And for the poor populations in Europe and the American South who came to rely on corn as a staple food, this oversight, it was catastrophic. It led to a horrifying epidemic of a disease called pellagra, a severe niacin deficiency known for its terrifying symptoms, the 4Ds.
The human cost was just staggering. In the United States alone, at its peak in the early 20th century, pellagra was killing 7,000 people every single year. An absolute tragedy, all because a plant was separated from its essential cultural knowledge.
So now let's scale up, because this partnership between people and plants
doesn't just shape our bodies and our cultures. Let's look at how the specific chemistry of a single tree literally dictated global politics, colonialism, and war for centuries.
The plant in question is the cinchona tree from the Andes, and its secret weapon is a chemical called quinine. For nearly 400 years, the bark of this one tree, the fever tree, was the only effective treatment in the world for malaria, one of the deadliest diseases in human history.
And its history, I'm not kidding, it reads like a spy thriller. After its use was learned from indigenous peoples in the 1630s, European colonial powers became obsessed with controlling it. This led to actual espionage, with the British and Dutch smuggling seeds out of South America to start their own plantations. By World War I, Dutch plantations in Java controlled almost the entire world's supply. So when those plantations fell to Japan in 1942, it caused a massive crisis for the Allied forces in World War II, and the fate of armies literally rested on the bark of this one tree.
So, after all of this long, complicated history, where does that leave us today? Once you understand this stuff, it brings up some pretty profound questions about our responsibilities, both to the plants themselves and to the people who first figured out their power.
And we have to be honest here. The history is messy. A lot of ethnobotany is deeply tangled up with colonial exploitation, where traditional knowledge was basically stolen for commercial profit. That dark past is exactly why there's now a global push to create new, ethical ways to do this kind of research.
At the heart of this movement is something called the Nagoya Protocol. It's an international agreement built on some really key ideas. It means that indigenous communities have to give free and informed consent before any research happens. It means that any benefits, whether they're financial or scientific, have to be shared fairly. And it means protecting a community's control over its own data.
All of this leads to this really profound shift in how we see things, what some researchers are calling the plant turn. And the idea is that we have to stop seeing plants as just passive resources, just scenery in the human drama. We have to start seeing them as active agents, as partners who have co-created the world that we all live in. And that leaves us with one last, really crucial question to think about. If we finally accept that plants have shaped our bodies, our cultures, and our history, if we accept that they have agency, then we have to ask ourselves, what do they ask of us in this partnership? What's our end of the bargain?